Great. So the subject of today's serendipity in science, and I want to allude in it a little bit before I start. The word serendipity can be interpreted in many different ways, and indeed there is a huge element of serendipity in science, and mostly I see it as the freedom to choose your own subject with no pressure. If people want to study and there is a good science behind why the banana curves, let them study it. There are forces, physical forces, very interesting subject that may even at the end may be translated. For example, to kyphosis of the spine. So if the science is good and there is a good question behind, do it. But it's not only serendipity. This was mentioned in the brief presentation by Harald Surhausen. We must have some hypothesis that will drive us. We have to test the hypothesis along the time, and so on. So it's serendipity along with many other factors that we were talking about yesterday during the dialogue. So I chose to tell you a little bit on our science, but that will be at the very end, and how it led us not only to serendipitous results, but to really unexpected drug development. The pharma industry is expanding and exploding with drugs, with novel drugs that are based on our discovery. But also to go back a little bit into the history of medicine and to show you that serendipity indeed served a major role at the very beginning, but then other elements were added to. So I'm living in a small country called Israel. It's on the very eastern side of the Mediterranean. We are 8 million people, half of the size of Chengdu, and this is my city, Haifa. It's a beautiful city. This is the medical school, and this is the teaching hospital. It's a major hospital. It sits on the sea in a beautiful place. This is the Baha'i Garden, which are World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and it's truly a beautiful place to be. So let's start a little bit with medicine. And think about where we are today. And of course, the dream of people is to remain young forever, but not only to remain young forever, but also to cure all diseases. And the question is whether this is possible. I cannot tell. I don't want to prophesize. If we learn from history, then the longer we live, there are more diseases. If you think about 100 years ago, 120 years ago, people lived only 50 years on the average. And they didn't die of cancer. There was cancer. Recently it was discovered that there was cancer in an Egyptian mummy. So there was cancer, but people didn't live long enough to get cancer. So only those that managed to live long got cancer, because cancer is mostly an age-related disease. Yes, we do see cancer in young people, but this is rare. 2 or 3% of all malignancies are occurring in young age. So we extended our lifespan in the magic 20th century by a whole series of development, from antibiotics to imaging to vaccination to sewage system, understanding clean food and clean environment and so on. So we were able to jump our lifespan, to boost our lifespan from 50, nearly 100 years ago, to more than 80 nowadays, and we are still climbing up the hill. But with it came more diseases. Basically, all the degenerative diseases showed up in big way in the 20th century. Think about cancer, think about heart diseases, think about neurodegenerative diseases. All those diseases that people didn't know 120 years ago, or they were very rare, because at that time people died of infections. There was no antibiotics. Showed up in the 20th century. Once we are going to defeat those, and we are going to live 150 years, who knows? I don't know. People say that we now know most of the genome, but this is also not true. Every day something new is coming, new layers of regulation, microRNA and so on are coming up. We are far away from understanding, and therefore we don't have the ability to predict whether we shall be able one day to cure all diseases. So let's go to the development of drugs and see what's going on before we are going to the current revolution of personalized medicine. And I want really to go to serendipity. And serendipity really, I think, brought to us maybe two of the most important drugs that at least I'm aware of in medicine, and I'm a physician myself, not practicing anymore, but I have a medical and surgical education. And it's really amazing what happened with those two drugs, though we cannot rely on serendipity anymore in drug development. These days are over. We have to be more planned and more programmed. So think about aspirin. Aspirin is probably the best drug that was ever made by the pharma. Certainly the drug that is being consumed nowadays in tons amount more than any other drug weight-wise. So we are consuming tons and tons of aspirin yearly. And aspirin was discovered by complete serendipity. Actually, it was a stage-wise. All the Egyptians already knew about aspirin in the leaves of the willow bark that grew on the bank of the Nile River. When they chewed it, it had a very bitter taste, but they noted, and we find it in their old writings, that it had a pain alleviating properties. So the old Egyptians, 4,000 years ago, already reported on pain alleviating properties of salicylic acid. Then, at that time, we didn't know. We are jumping very quickly to the 19th century, and Charles Gerhard, a French chemist, and then Buchner, the German one, purified salicylic acid and found that this is indeed the active ingredient, but it was too bitter to be used. And then it was further on acetylated, and the acetylation luckily took away the bitterness, but did leave behind the pain relieving properties. Now we are coming to the very beginning of the first century. So everything was known about the material, and we are coming to a kind of a heroic story, to a German pharma company by the name of Bayer, still a very big company. And there were two people there. One of them was Felix Hoffmann. The other one was a Jew that was fired by the Germans, as happened to many of them at the beginning of the rise of the Nazis to power by Karl Eichengreen. And both of them were working on salicylic acid until the father of Felix got rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis is a disease, it's a debilitating disease in which the joints are inflamed. And once your joints are inflamed and painful, and you are basically paralyzed. You cannot walk, you cannot eat, you cannot cut your food, you cannot button your shirt, you cannot dry up yourself after you are showering. Basically, you are paralyzed. It's a debilitating disease. And what Felix Hoffmann thought that, oh, there is something to relieve pain, let's synthesize it in large amount and give it to my father. So a chemist in a company, go to the basement or to the company facilities, synthesize as a simple material, that's the whole thing. Sorry for that. It's a very simple material, acetylsalicylic acid. Every high school student can synthesize it in the basement, and gave it to his father. And lo and behold, not only the pain went away, but the inflammation went away. So he said, wow, I discovered something very big. He went to the company and convinced them to make aspirin as a drug, and indeed the company started to make aspirin, initially as a powder, later on as. It took another 50 or 60 years to discover why aspirin is relieving also inflammation. There is another Nobel Prize on that, on cyclotrions and inflammatory mediators. And now we understand exactly not only the anti-pain activity, but also the anti-inflammatory activity. Now, what's the heck with aspirin? Okay, you go to the pharmacy, you buy it if you have fever or you have pain. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, again, an old story started to flow. And that's the connection between chronic inflammation and cancer. We knew about it from the days of Paul Ehrlich, who described it first, but we didn't know the mechanism. Now we understand also the mechanism, that chronic inflammation, typically it's subtle subclinical inflammation. We don't know even that we are inflamed. Actually, this morning I discussed it with Neil, the nice student that accompanies me, that chronic inflammation of the liver due to several viral infections, hepatitis virus, leads at the end to cancer of the liver. And this is true for breast cancer and for prostate cancer and for numerous other cancers. So if you have subtle subclinical chronic inflammation, you may end up with cancer. And it turned out that aspirin taking chronically as a preventive drug is the best chemopreventive drug. Millions of people in the world, including myself, I'm a strong believer in aspirin, have been ingested aspirin for decades in order to prevent cancer, and I will not go into the statistics, it's crystal clear. At least for colorectal carcinoma and some of the most advanced cancer, and the knowledge is still coming up, so we still don't know the end of the story. Then in parallel came another story. Aspirin turned also to be an anticoagulant. It prevents blood coagulation. This is not President Clinton, but somebody like President Clinton got a heart attack. And heart attack is due to coagulation of blood in the coronary arteries that lead blood, that supply blood to the heart muscle itself. It's due to a long process of accumulation of cholesterol in atheromatotic lesion. I will not go into it. It's a beautiful work of Mike Brown and Joe Goldstein that won also the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And it turns out that people that got the first heart attack are susceptible to another one by continuation of the process. And one way to prevent the coagulation of the blood over the atheromatotic lesion is to use aspirin or other anticoagulants. So look at aspirin, from anti-fever and anti-pain to anti-cancer and anti-heart attack, and we are talking the big diseases of the Western society. Now you can understand why aspirin, that developed with no intention actually, that was known by the Egyptian but was led to become a drug to relieve pain of the father of Felix Hoffman, that was a chemist in Bayer, turned out to be the number one. I can tell you, it's number one blockbuster in the drug farm. Let me go to another one. And another one is penicillin, complete serendipity. I cannot imagine the world today without antibiotics. Sir Alexander Fleming won the Nobel Prize for this discovery, so this was a British microbiologist. And here you can see a petri dish. This is not the original one. The original one is in the British Museum in London. And this is a bacterial schmear. That's how bacteria look when they grow on the nutritious media, on the agar that is spread underneath. It's transparent, so you cannot see. By mistake, complete mistake, he forgot an agar dish open on the bench, and he left for the weekend in the summer of 21, and came after a few days. And when he came back, he saw this white colony coming up, and he immediately identified this as a fungal colony. It's a colony of fungi. And how did it get there? It got there from the air. The air is full of spores. The spore fell, we are breathing them on the nutritious media, and grew to generate this whole colony. Typically, it happens to me also, not to me, I don't work physically in the lab, I'm very rare now, but to my students all the time. When they see it, of course, you have to throw the whole dish, because the dish is contaminated. You are interested in the bacteria. You don't want any contamination. But Fleming had an eye, and he noted that there is a halo here. And in the halo, it prevented the growth of the bacteria. The bacteria couldn't go and touch the colony. They stopped a few millimeters away. And he said to himself, maybe the fungal colony secretes some material that prevents the growth of bacteria, and he called this material antibiotics, anti against bios life. Well, he was not a chemist, he was a microbiologist, he didn't know what to do with it. And two other British scientists, Sir Ernst James and Howard Florey, took it, and at the end of after more than 10 years, penicillin came to the world, and it was used already during World War I and saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the Allies fighting in Europe against the Nazis. And they won the Nobel Prize, but then not only that, but the principle was discovered, that fungi, in order to protect themselves, and it's very interesting what's going on in the microbial world, how they develop, even CRISPR-Cas was developed the same, because it's part of an innate immunity system. And then Selman Waxman in New Jersey, in Rutgers University, said, if there is one fungus that secretes antibacterial, antibiotic material, maybe there are others. And he discovered in streptomycin. A second antibiotic came to the world, and then an avalanche started. We cannot imagine the world today without antibiotics. So think about it, complete serendipity, but with the sharp eye of the scientist. Who else noted this little halo here that brought to one of the major discoveries of the 21st century. But as I said at the beginning, we cannot rely on serendipity. We need to be programmed. We need to think differently. And drug development these days took a completely different turn, accompanied by serendipity, but in a more planned way. And we are now talking, we started a few years ago, a few decades ago, with what we call high throughput screening. And that's again because of the development of chemistry. It's a less intelligent approach, but nevertheless useful one. Chemistry brought us millions of compounds, intermediate, final product, and people say, oh, we have so many compounds, why not to try them on animal models of disease or on cell models of diseases? We were able to develop, not we, in the scientific community, develop different models either in animals or in culture cells of diseases, and people say, let's combine the two. We have millions of compounds, let's try them one by one, by one, by one, by one. Maybe one will work. It's like if you lose your key at home and you lock the door behind you, and you bring not a thief to help you, but somebody professional, he may come with a set of 1,000 keys, and we'll try them one by one. Well, that's a primitive way to do it. But because why? Because the company is making so many keyholes, or so many types of locks. They don't make endless. They make 1,000, 2,000, doesn't matter. So the idea about nature was the same, that nature will make so many different varieties of its different components, and one of the millions will fit in. So of course, I'm oversimplifying things, but the whole system was developed by all the, if you go to a big pharma company, you go to Merck, you go to Novartis, to Johnson, you will see these huge screening facilities, robotics, that they go to, they have all these compounds sitting on trays, and a robot go into the tray, goes take a little sample, aliquot of the drug, go to the tissue culture cells, put them in, go back to the incubator, then hold the dishes that got the different drugs, are going to the microscope. Let's say that we want to develop an anti-cancer drug, so we are following growth of cells. The microscope, the artificial intelligence software will tell you in dish number, whatever, A, row A, slot number, site number 7, there is something. That's not a drug, of course. That's even not a lead. It's the very beginning. That you have something there that may inhibit cell growth, but then that's the way you isolate the leads, and then you go through a whole huge process. But it begins with a screening, and let me bring you one example of a screening, and that's how statins came to the world. Statins are very successful drugs. Unlike aspirin, that is probably that you can buy a whole year's supply. I typically buy mine in America in Walgreens or CVS for $5. You can buy a whole year's supply. Statins are being sold for billions of dollars a year. It's a very expensive drug. Statins were discovered by Akira Endo, a pharmacist in Japan. It worked in a company, actually. It was not in a university context. And he decided to screen. He set up an assay for cholesterol biosynthesis. The idea is he wanted to discover a drug that will reduce the level of cholesterol in the heart arteries, in the coronary artery. And he screened a library of Japanese natural products that were collected from different fungi and plants in Japan. Actually, he screened a library of more 15,000, it was a small library, of 15,000 drugs in the early 70s, and he discovered the first statin. It took the company some time to do all the clinical trials and so on. And in the late 70s, the first statin made it to the market. It's a huge success story. They have side effects. I don't want to go into it. But it reduced morbidity and mortality of heart attacks in a very big way. There are still big discussions going in the literature, but it's no doubt it's a big success. That came out of a screening. What he said a very cumbersome radioactive assay. It wasn't a simple assay. And he had to monitor one by one by one. It was like a manual screening, but very sophisticated. And you see here you can have an example of what happens in the coronary artery. This is the artery that goes to the heart, and you see that gradually a cholesterol plaque is being generated here, and it grows and grows and grows and grows, and at the end, a blood clot is generated, and it occludes the blood flow to the heart, and people are dying while running, while I don't know what. Suddenly, you lose the supply to the heart muscle, And this process, I will not go through the process, which was discovered by another Nobel laureate, by Conrad Bloch, the biosynthetic pathway of cholesterol. This drug prevents the accumulation of cholesterol at this site. So this was not serendipity, this was a blind, cumbersome, non-intelligent, quote-unquote, screen that brought an unbelievable drug to the market. And let me just say about the last one, which is not about precision medicine. This is where we are walking now, the revolution that we are walking now. And the precision of personalized, predictive, preventive, and participatory medicine. These are the 4 P's that were put by Lee Hood. And I wouldn't say the father, there is no father to this revolution, but somebody who really pushed the whole idea by technology, came from the idea that even screening is not good enough, because screening, what we are doing, we are screening for a drug, we are developing it, we are trying it on animal models, we are doing some clinical trials on patients, and then it's going to the market, but nevertheless, in many cases, it's not successful. And if you are taking any group of patients, doesn't matter, that have similar disease, let's say women with breast cancer, women with prostate cancer, heart attack patients, Alzheimer's disease patients, doesn't matter. And you start to treat them, you see that very quickly they split into 2 big groups. Some are benefiting from the treatment, depending on the disease, and some don't benefit. They either aggravate, they develop side effects, they do all kinds of things, doesn't matter. They have to be taken off the drug or they die, whatever. But we don't have a predictive tool to understand why the reaction of people to drug is so variable and extending a huge span. And we realize very quickly that we are treating people, and people are different from one another. You are Chinese, I'm Israeli, we are genetically we are different. That's the first thing. We cannot even infuse blood to one another. I mean, we are, not to say kidney transplant. We are very different. Different diet, different climate, different genetic repertoire, different everything. Well, we have 2 legs and 2 eyes and 2 hands, all of us, hopefully. But otherwise, we are very different. We are similar, but we are very different. And therefore, we react differently. The disease is not the same in each and one of us. It's a superficial description. A disease of breast cancer in one woman can be due to one mutation in the EGF receptor, and the same tumor, not the same, a tumor in the breast in another woman can be due to a mutation in the estrogen receptor. So it's a different mutation, and we need to change our approach and to analyze each patient, and that's what we call precision, or personalized. We need to analyze the disease. I have 20 more minutes, or what? Wow, that's a lot of time. I'm not, I thought at 20 more seconds. I'm finishing soon. So we need to test the disease. We need to look at the disease in the context of the patient, not in the context of the disease. So we flip the mirror. We are not treating patients with a gold standard treatment, but we are treating the disease in the context of the patient. This approach is really revolutionary. We are at the beginning of it, because it will lead also by sequencing not only the genome. The genome is important, but we need to sequence the transcriptome and the proteome and the post-translational proteome and the dynamic post-translational proteome. It's very complicated, but it will lead also to discovery of new causes of diseases, because for some of the diseases we know the reason why, but for some of the diseases, for example, there is a whole group of breast cancer patients that we call triple negative. What is triple negative? They don't have a mutation in the EGF receptor, they don't have a mutation in the progesterone receptor, and they don't have a mutation in the EGF and the estrogen receptor. So what do they have? They have cancer. The cancer is due to something. And it's a very aggressive cancer. Actually, this is the most risky cancer of all breast cancer, because it's untreatable. We don't know what to do with it. But we need to discover the reason. So the idea will be to take all those women and now to start work on them. And once we find the reason, we are going to develop drugs accordingly. So it's a big revolution that is coming up as we speak. And I think that one of the heroes of this revolution, before I go to the very few last minutes of my talk, is this little beautiful American actress, Angelina Jolie. And Angelina Jolie came a few years ago with a declaration, with a public declaration that she's going to remove her breast. And then after a year, she came with another declaration that she's going to remove her ovaries. And the reason being that her mother died of a breast cancer, and her aunt, the sister of her mother, died of ovarian cancer, which is much deadlier than breast cancer. And the reason that was discovered that they are all carrying a genetic mutation in a gene called BRCA1, BRCA1, or breast cancer 1. It's interesting because BRCA1 happens to be a member of the ubiquitin family that we discovered, and we know now the function of it and why mutations cause the problem, but that's another story. And she exemplifies, I think in many ways, not only the courage to come and to encourage other women to be tested and so on, but what we are talking about, molecular precision medicine. What she did for herself, she basically removed the ticking bomb. She is not sick, but she had a huge risk, an 80% risk to have breast cancer along the time. Wouldn't she remove her breast or her ovaries, 40% risk for ovarian cancer, and so on and so forth. So that's what I mean by precision medicine, by screening individually people for specific mutations that are known to render people susceptible to certain disease. So let's forget about this, and let me go very quickly in 2 words, just to our own work. I'm not going to tell you about how we discovered the system. It was not serendipity, but it was completely unexpected. It was beautiful in the sense that when I was a graduate student with Avram Hershko, was my mentor. Actually, the Nobel Prize was awarded for my PhD work, for my graduate study work, but then I continued on my own independently along the years. And that it was a question that was asked from the bottom, how proteins are degraded in the cell, but there was already a mechanism that was awarded the Nobel Prize. There was the lysosome, but there were milestones that told us that the lysosome is not the entire story. And this was the beauty of it. There was like small slits that told us, well, the lysosome is okay, but not perfectly okay. And let's go and find something else. We had no clue what we are going after. And we had to put this very simple essay and peeling the whole system as an onion layer by layer. I'm telling you this story because the end result didn't come from us, and that's, I think, the beauty of science. And another way that serendipity can take people, can take the whole community forward. And this is the system that we discovered. I will not go again into the detail. The system is a huge system of 2,000 components. It's about 10%, almost 10% of the whole human genome, and it's involved in basically every process in the cell. I mean, there is no basic process. Well, there are probably some processes escaping, but I mean, maintenance of the quality control of the genome and the proteome, cell division, entry into the cell via receptor, via all the different mechanisms, exit from the cell via all the different mechanisms, and so on and so forth. It's a very complex process that, as I said, I discovered when I was a graduate student of a superb biochemist, of Avram Hershko. And there are diseases that are related to it. I will not go to all of them because proteins are kept in a steady state. They are being synthesized and degraded, and 2 things can happen to them. Either the protein will be excessively degraded, or a protein will not be degraded and accumulate. And this will lead to disease. Think about hemoglobin, for example, the protein that carries oxygen. If we have too little of it, we cannot breathe. Why? Because there is not enough oxygen carrying capacity. If there will be too much of it, the blood will become viscous and will clot. So we need, everything has to be, you know, if you think about our body, it's all about numbers. The weight, the height, the sight, the hearing, all the values, the blood pressure, glucose, everything is numbered. And we have to keep those numbers at a range, and if we deviate, we are in a problem. So many diseases are attributed to one of those, and brain diseases, for example, many Alzheimer's diseases and so on, they have accumulated of this protein that cannot be degraded. You see the flames here, that it's immunohistochemical flames of aggregate the protein that cannot be removed and so on. And in cancer there are many, but I don't want to go into it. I just want to tell you the story of 2 drugs that we did not develop. We had nothing to do with them. And that's maybe the beauty of science, that people take knowledge and take it further. We are think about ourselves, even in our whole lifetime, we are adding a thin layer of knowledge. If it's important, it will be distilled to the next generation. They will take it further and further, and that's exactly what happened to us. We had never been involved in any drug development, in any disease or so on. We put just the foundation, and then people in research universities and then in companies took it and converted it into not only a multi-billion-dollar industry, but saving lives of millions of people. One drug is Valcade, was developed by a Boston-based company initially called Millennium. Now it was sold to a Japanese company, to Takeda. And you see it's a boronic acid derivative. It inhibits our system. It inhibits one component of our system. And it's a very efficient drug for a disease called multiple myeloma. I will not go and give you lessons in medicine. It's type of a blood cancer in which the cell, the B cells, the immune B cells multiply in an uncontrolled manner, and they secrete an antibody, so it's immune cells, and you see here the galloping, the stampeding level of the immunoglobulin. Treatment started here with conventional chemotherapy. It helped a little bit, but not much, and then the disease surged again. And here started the treatment with Valcade, and you see nice regression. You can see it also in the bone marrow of the patient. You see here the bone marrow is full, 40% full with malignant cancerous cells, and following treatment with all the normal cells there. And then there is another drug that came back to life, also based on our system, and the drug is called thalidomide. I don't want to go into it. Thalidomide was a drug that was used in Europe in the 60s to prevent vomiting of pregnant women. It turned out to be very teratogenic drug. Children, babies that came out from women that ingested the drug just to prevent vomiting during pregnancy were malformed. They came with one hand, no fingers, awful malformations. And it turns out that thalidomide that was buried then came back to life in a big way. The sales, the annual sales now of thalidomide and its derivatives are exceeding now $5 billion a year. It's a huge, there is a big company that does it in New Jersey, Celgene. And what thalidomide is doing is basically a product. Product is proteolysis targeting. It's a molecular glue. It takes an element of the ubiquitin system, and it takes a target protein that needs to be degraded, that normally is accumulating during cancer. It can be mutated MYC, it can be mutated zinc finger protein, it can be cyclin D that drives the cell cycle, and it brings them together, it's gluing them, and then the target protein is being ubiquitinated by our system and degraded, chopped down, and removed. So we had nothing to do with this development, and it came by basic knowledge. So you put something, and I think that this is serendipity also, that you cannot predict whether what you do is important or not. It's only time and the next generation that will come that will tell whether what you did is important or not important. So you see, the word serendipity is, in my opinion, the freedom to do something that by your judgment and then later on by the judgment of the community is important and good. And then it will be flourishing. So it's not just, okay, let's go by the luck. It's something else, but nevertheless, there is an important element of serendipity in what we are doing, either in what we are doing directly, or in how what we are doing is translated along the time by the entire community. Thank you very, very much for your attention.